What had the Philistines done to weaken Saul's army? This is the question we seek to answer today as we continue our verse-by-verse study of the book of 1 Samuel on Walking Through the Bible. Today we're going to be discussing 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 16 to 23. But before we do that, let's read the passage. If you have a Bible with you, you can turn to 1 Samuel chapter 13, verse 16. But if you don't have a Bible, don't worry. Just follow along with us on the screen. The version that we'll be reading from is the New King James Version. So 1 Samuel chapter 13, beginning at verse 16. Saul, Jonathan his son, and the people present with them remained in Gibeah of Benjamin. But the Philistines encamped in Michmash. Then raiders came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. One company turned onto the road to Ophrah, to the land of Shual. Another company turned to the road to Bethoron, and another company turned to the road to the border that overlooks the valley of Zeboim, towards the wilderness. Now there was no blacksmith to be found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, "Lest the Hebrews make swords or spears." But all the Israelites would go down to the Philistines to sharpen each man's plowshare, his mattock, his axe, and his sickle. And the charge for sharpening was a pim for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, the axes, and to set the points of the goads. So it came about on the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan. But they were found with Saul and Jonathan his son. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the pass of Michmash. Between the end of chapter 7 and now, just over 25 years have passed. The reason we need to note this is because we know that Samuel defeated the Philistines back in chapter 7, and even gained some land back taken from the Philistines. But here the Philistines are again with a garrison in Benjamin, threatening Israel with attack, and even having the ability of keeping Israel disarmed. The reason for this, of course, is that Israel had again strayed from following the Lord fully, thinking that they needed an earthly king to lead them. This type of straying away from God led God to allow Israel's enemies to afflict them from time to time. Some affliction might be worse than others, but any affliction is not pleasant. As king, Saul made a standing army, and one of his first goals was to evict the Philistines from a garrison in Gibeah of Benjamin. Jonathan was successful at this, but of course the Philistines were not going to allow Israel to attack them, so they sent a large contingent of chariots and soldiers into Israel to attack. Of course, seeing this contingent struck fear into the hearts of Israel, so much so that much of Saul's army fled. For his part, though, Saul wasn't afraid. He was impatient, for before going to battle, he was waiting for Samuel to come to Gilgal and offer a sacrifice to God, but Saul wasn't afraid. Saul's impatience, though, would lead him to offer the sacrifice himself, something that because he was not a priest, he was not allowed to do. As for his sin, Samuel, when he arrived, told Saul that his kingdom would not continue. He wouldn't be stripped of the kingdom then, but God would seek out a man after his own heart and give the kingdom to that man instead of Saul's sons. Samuel departed from Gilgal to Gibeah, leaving Saul to deal with the Philistines. What we have in verses 16 to 23 is the beginning of the description of the battle that will take place in chapter 14. Verse 16 says that Saul and Jonathan, along with the 600 men of the remaining army, remained in Gibeah of Benjamin. Most other English translations have Gibeah of Benjamin, and this makes much more sense as our map shows that Gibeah, where the Philistine garrison had been, was closer to Michmash, where the Philistines were now gathered, than Gibeah was. Recall from earlier in the chapter, though, that the Philistine army was huge compared to even Saul's army before many had fled. They could have taken Saul and the army in Gilgal, but they didn't. They could have taken them as Saul's army left Gilgal for Gibeah, but they didn't. And although we're not told why, perhaps their reasoning was one of arrogance. For we find out that during that time, the Philistines had managed to remove blacksmiths from the land of Israel, meaning that those in the area didn't have any weapons like swords or spears, with the exception of Saul and Jonathan. Due to a lack of blacksmiths, it also meant that Israel didn't have a means to sharpen their farming implements, meaning that they would have to go down to the Philistines to do so, who would then in turn charge them money for the service. Now, where this is said to occur is in the land of Israel, but what we're likely talking about here is the surrounding area in Benjamin and Judah, closer to the Philistine territory, as those who came from the northern Israel back in chapter 11 to attack the Ammonites did seem to have weapons. But whatever the case, not having weapons can help explain the fear that overcame Saul's army earlier in the chapter, and can help explain why the Philistines didn't attack immediately. In their arrogance, due to their large numbers, they didn't feel threatened. Instead, the Philistines sent out raiders to plunder the surrounding regions as punishment for attacking the Philistine garrison. One company turned towards the road of Ophrah, which is located about 6 miles or 10 kilometers north and slightly east of Michmash. The second company turned west towards Bethoron, a key route from the Philistine plain to the Benjamin Plateau. It may be that this group was simply consolidating control of the area and trying to prevent being cut off in the direction of home should a battle not go their way. The third company turned towards the road of the border that overlooks the valley of Zeboim, towards the wilderness. The route up from up the Zeboim Valley connected the area of Jericho and Gilgal with the region of Bethel and other areas to the north of Michmash. So in doing this, not only were the Philistines inflicting pain on Israel, but they were also removing many of the escape routes for Saul and the army, forcing them to fight the garrison that remained at Michmash. How would that battle go? We'll find out, the Lord willing, in the next lesson. With that, our time is up for today. The Lord willing, we hope you'll join us for tomorrow's discussion of 1 Samuel chapter 14, verses 1 to 10, as we continue our walk through the Bible, one verse at a time. Thank you for watching today's episode. We hope that you found it edifying and ask that you not only subscribe to our channel and podcast, but that you like and share this episode among your friends, so that the saving gospel of Jesus Christ can go out to the whole world.